Welcome to the Release the Genie Within podcast. Today I want to talk about principle number 10 from my ebook, 52 Laws and Principles of the Infinite Filmmaker. And I want to talk about it in the context of what many of us are feeling right now. You know, if you turn on the news, scroll through social media, and listen to conversations happening around the country, you're going to notice something very quickly. You know, people are afraid. They're worried about the future of our democracy. They're worried about their freedom. And they're also worried about what kind of a world that we're leaving for the next generation. And when fear starts to spread through a culture, something interesting happens. Fear begins writing the screenplay for your life's movie. But principle number 10 reminds us of something incredibly important. It says that the creative process starts with a thought, which is immediately acted upon by the infinite filmmaker to create your experience. In other words, before anything becomes real in the outer world, it begins as a thought in the mind. Think about a movie for a moment. Every film that has ever been made started with a single idea. A writer sat down and imagined a story, and before the cameras rolled, before the actors performed, and before the sets were built, it existed only as a thought. That thought became a script, the script became a production, and eventually that production became the movie that we see on the screen. Life works in the same way. According to the teachings of Ernest Holmes and the science of mind, the universe itself operates through a creative process. In my work as a coach, I call that creative intelligence the infinite filmmaker creating the movie of your life. It's the same power that creates galaxies, stars, oceans, and even the forest. It's the intelligence that keeps the planets moving in perfect balance. And there's an amazing part to this too. The same creative power is operating through you. Principle 10 teaches something that can be both exciting and a little shocking. The infinite filmmaker doesn't sit in the sky deciding which thoughts it likes and which thoughts it will ignore. It doesn't say, I'll create hopeful thoughts, but ignore fearful ones. No, it acts on all of them. It simply receives a thought and begins turning it into an experience. It is like this cosmic projector. Whatever film you place in the projector, that's the movie that plays on the screen. So if we constantly project fear, anger, hopelessness, the outer experience of life begins reflecting those same conditions. But what if we project faith, vision, and possibility? Then the story begins to shift. Right now, many people feel overwhelmed by what's happening in the country. Political conflict, division, arguments about the future of democracy. And when people feel powerless, the mind begins imagining the worst-case scenario. What if everything falls apart? What if the country is lost? What if things never get better? But there's a deeper truth. Fear is just a thought. It may feel powerful, but it's still only a thought moving through consciousness. And if we continually rehearse fearful thoughts in our minds, we are feeding them into the creative process of the universe. We are unknowingly helping write this very story that we don't want to experience. That's why principle number 10 asks us to become conscious of our thoughts, not to deny reality, not to pretend problems don't exist, but to remember that our inner reaction is part of the creative process. In the Infinite Filmmaker teachings, I often talk about two perspectives, the character in the movie and the director of the movie. When we are overwhelmed by fear and worry, we are living only as the character. The character reacts to everything happening in the scene. But when we remember the creative process begins within us, we step into the role of co-director. And from that place, we have a different question. Instead of asking what terrible thing might happen next, we begin asking, what kind of story do I want to help create? This is where the principle becomes incredibly powerful. According to the science of mind, your individual mind and the universal mind are not separate. They're expressions of the same intelligence. Think of it like a drop of water in the ocean. The drop looks separate, but its substance is the same as the ocean itself. Your mind is a drop within the infinite ocean of mind. So when you think a thought, the universal mind receives it instantly. And because that universal intelligence is creative, it begins arranging life experiences that correspond to that thought. That means something extraordinary. Your thoughts are not small, they're creative instructions to the universe. Now, here's where we regain our power. We cannot always control what happens in the outer world, but we can always choose the thought we hold in consciousness. When the news cycle is screaming fear, we can choose faith. And when people around us are angry, we can choose clarity. And when the future feels uncertain, we can choose vision. And that choice matters more than we realize, because the infinite filmmaker is always responding. It is always listening. It is always turning our thoughts into form. You know, one of the greatest spiritual practices is learning to see beyond the appearances. Yes, there are challenges in our society. Yes, democracy may feel fragile. And yes, people may be divided. But history has shown us something again and again. Human consciousness evolves. New ideas emerge. And often the darkest moments are the moments that awaken people to their deepest power. You know, the civil rights movement, the peace movement, the spiritual awakening, moments that happened in the past. And all of these begin with people who refuse to let fear become the final script. Instead, they imagine something better. And that imagination begins shaping the future. So the real question becomes this: what kind of future are we imagining today? Are we rehearsing the story of collapse? Or are we envisioning a world where freedom, creativity, and compassion continue to grow? Principle 10 reminds us that every great transformation begins with a thought, begins with a vision or an idea. And when enough people hold a new vision in consciousness, the collective story begins to change. This week, I invite you to try something simple. Whenever you notice fear or worry entering your mind, pause for a moment, take a breath, and remind yourself, I am the co-creator of the movie of my life. Then ask yourself, what thought would I rather project onto the screen? Maybe it's a thought of peace, maybe it's a thought of unity, or maybe it's a thought of creative solutions that none of us can see yet. Hold that thought, feel it. Let it become the dominant vibration in your mind, because every thought you hold is like placing a new reel of film in the projector of the universe. The infinite filmmaker is still creating, despite everything happening in the world. The creative power of life has not stopped. That same intelligence that created the stars, the same presence that inspired the great teachers of humanity, and the same power that Jesus spoke about when he said the kingdom of God is within you, that power is still active, and it's still creating, and it's responding to the thoughts that we hold in consciousness. So let us choose wisely. Let us choose courage over fear, vision over despair, and love over division, because the movie of humanity is still being written. Each one of us is helping write the next scene. So if you're interested in learning more about the Infinite Filmmaker teachings, you can go to theinfinitefilmmaker.com. I'm there to support you on your journey of transformation. And I've also created a sacred space where we get together every Saturday from 2 p.m. until 4 p.m. Pacific time. We get together on the bluffs of Santa Monica, California, where we meditate, pray, and vision for a peaceful future, where we can live free from the fear, doubt, and worry that's consuming our nation. So if you want to join us, you can learn more at spiritualcoalition.org. So thank you for joining me today. If you're on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Substack, just follow, like, share, get the word out there, because this information is really important, especially at this time in history.